Professor Camilla Naidu, Executive Dean, Faculty of Humanities. Professor Pragna Rugunanan, the inductee. I practiced the surname many a times, and when I came into the venue, I still got it wrong, and Camilla had to help me, so I'm hoping that I did it justice, Professor Pragna. Professor Ria Smith, who I know, or I think is online, who's joining us online, the respondent, online recording, thank you. The Adjunct Professor of Sociology at the Lone Star College, Montgomery, Houston, USA, and Senior Research Fellow here at UJ, senior leaders of the university, members of Senate and other academics, distinguished guests, students, all who have joined us. Sanbonani, Goeienaand, good evening, Tobela. I always think that they forget to say family, because I think we have family here this evening as well. And I know we do because I've met some of the family members. And for me, it's truly a very happy occasion when we engage on an academic level, but when we get to engage and see the family that is support systems of the people who are now reaching the pinnacle of their career. So I think it's lovely and it's an honor to meet the family, to welcome the family to UJ, and to come and support Pragna in a special occasion this evening. It is indeed a great honor and a special privilege for me to welcome you to the Professorial Inaugural Lecture of Professor Pragna Rugunanan. As I do so, I wish to express a warm welcome to her loved ones, special guests, and colleagues. This is a proud and joyful, yet a landmark moment for all of you, for Professor Pragna, for us here at UJ, for higher education in South Africa and beyond. The inauguration of professors is a public ceremony in which newly appointed professors are inducted into office by the Vice-Chancellor and deliver their inaugural address. The ceremony has its roots in medieval university and serves multiple purposes. First, it is an expression of welcome and an entry for new professors joining the circle of colleagues who are already professors. Secondly, it is a platform for professors to display their expertise in the discipline and to showcase their research. In the colonial tradition subscribed to by many universities, assuming the role of professor refers to the gown and the cap. Once we have listened to the inaugural address, the gown, denoting the professorship, will be formally assumed by Professor Pragna. Today we gather to witness Professor Rugunanan's entry into the illustrious community of scholars at the university. It celebrates her contributions to the discipline and ultimately her impact on society. Professors provide a university with its identity, its character, academic legitimacy, and its integrity. The inaugural lecture is a rite of passage following the confirmation of the appointment of the person as a professor. The power of the inaugural address is when their expertise is showcased beyond the corridors of the university and reverberates within society. It stands out as a moment of pride for the incumbent, the family, fellow scholars, and the university. In the past, several philosophers and scholars have defined universities using a very narrow conceptualization. For example, they may have said, it's the search for truth, for universal knowledge, and even as instruments serving the purpose of the economy or being very utilitarian in nature. Through our work and research at UJ, I hope that we can break out of these narrow conceptualizations and reflect on the university as contributing to the public good and working towards societal impact. What then is the role of the intellectual? Edward Said, in one of his articles, defines the role of an intellectual as follows, and I quote, "One who commands a vast knowledge of a specific discipline, one who is rigorous in the analysis of literature, one who views being an intellectual as a vocation, who functions as a kind of public memory to recall what is forgotten or ignored, to make the connections that are otherwise hidden, and to provide alternatives for mistaken policies." End of quote. It remains then for us, as a university with a Pan-African vision, to derive our mandate as intellectuals and as professors. Importantly, how do we embrace the role of a professor as a disruptor while continuing to be a flagship carrier of our disciplines? This evening, we will listen to Professor Pragna as one further step in her journey of being a professor. This is a journey which does not conclude once this lecture has been given. Notwithstanding, this inaugural lecture does create an opportunity for a self-reflective pause in the journey of the professor. Let me now invite the Executive Dean, Professor Camilla Naidu, to introduce Professor Pragna. I thank you. Rea leboga, Niabonga, baie dankie.
Good evening, Sanibonani, Dumelang, Goeienaand. DVC academic, Prof. Siam Khan, Prof. Pragna Rugunanan, and the Rugunanan family. having taught everyone how to pronounce it, I confused myself. And the Rugunanan family, discussant, Prof. Ria Smit, fellow academics and guests. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Prof. Pragna Rugunanan. I will read some abstracts from her biography. Prof. Rugunanan is an industrial sociologist who is passionate about her research on migration. Her focus is on the construction of African and South Asian migrant communities in South Africa. Her work contributes significantly to understanding migration patterns, particularly in the context of South Africa and the Global South, as well as the intersections of migration with gender, labor, and identity, with a newer focus on the role of digital technology and migration, migration brokerage, and migration and care of the elderly. She also has a keen interest and has conducted research on the higher education landscape in South Africa, with an emphasis on academic career paths and experiences in South African universities. She also examines issues of belonging and exclusion in the academy from an intersectional perspective. Pragna's research interests include the sociology of migration, labor studies, changing patterns of work, agreement from that side, I see, social networks, and community studies. She has published on migration, gender, xenophobia, education, and citizenship in local and international journals, books, and book chapters. She was part of the editorial collective for gender questions from 2019 to 2020. In March 2023, she was appointed to the editorial board of the Migration and Development Journal. Since August 2023, Pragna has been the Vice Dean of Research in the Faculty of Humanities. She served as Head of Department of Sociology for the period 2019 to 2021 and was reappointed for a second term from 2022 to July 2023. So she's done her bit for the faculty. Pragna took a break from academia from August 2000 and rejoined in 2008. Since graduating in 2016, she has played various leadership roles in the faculty, including chair of the Faculty Higher Degrees Committee from 2018 to 2019 and co-chaired thereafter. In 2020, she was recommended for the UJ Distinguished Research Leadership Program, a flagship program at UJ to develop future research leaders. Pragna completed a BSoc Science and Honours degrees at Rhodes University, a Master's cum laude from the University of Pretoria, and she attained a D.Lit. et Full in Sociology from the University of Johannesburg with a thesis entitled Forged Communities, a sociological exploration of identity and community amongst immigrant and migrant communities in Fordsburg, supervised by Prof. Sakela Bushlungu and Prof. Ria Smit. She is a C2 NRF-rated scholar and has served on various NRF panels, including being invited by the Global Pluralism Monitor and International Research and Education Center in Ottawa to serve as an expert assessor for South Africa from April 2021 to June 2022. In 2022, she was invited to join the Canadian Excellence Research Chair in Migration at Toronto Metropolitan University as a distinguished scholar to work in the thematic area Southern Perspectives on Migration and Migrant Integration. In 2021 and 2023, Pragna was the lead investigator for the research call TAP Recovery, Renewal and Resilience in a Post-Pandemic World, with collaborative partners from South America, North America, Europe, and the UK, leading a group of 20 international scholars. She is a lead author for their co-edited book, published in May 2022, titled Migration in Southern Africa. Pragna was invited to the School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell University during October 2022 to attend a conference on migration, ethnicity, race, gender, and labor market inequality in sub-Saharan Africa and the Asia-Pacific region to foster dialogue and mentor junior faculty members, and there have been many accolades over the past few years. She's published over 30 journal articles and book chapters in acknowledged journals and platforms. She's also published several research reports. Pragna is passionate about capacity building and mentoring her students, and since 2010 has graduated 56 honors, 26 masters, and 8 doctoral students, with many others close to completion. In her spare time, Pragna enjoys reading, baking, walking, and hiking, and spending time with her family. She's married with 2 sons, a daughter-in-law, and an adorable grandson. She would really like to take some time to engage in more leisurely creative pursuits like painting and knitting. So we are very, very proud of your achievements, Prof. Rugunanan. Thank you very much, and please address us now.
Well, finally, the big day is here. Distinguished colleagues, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear, dear family. To Prof. Siam Khan, Deputy Vice Chancellor of Teaching, Prof. Kamala Naidu, thank you for the warm welcome and for officiating at my inaugural lecture. To Professor Sarah Gravitt, Acting DVC of Research, thank you very much. I'm really honored to have your presence here today. I'm inspired by these strong women in leadership who have paved the way for my own journey. To my colleagues, friends, and most importantly, students, both present and those that are online, thank you for your presence. I would like to acknowledge my brother-in-law, Mr. Justice Sunil Rugunanan, who, though unable to attend in person, might be joining us virtually due to work commitments. Thank you for your encouragement and support. As a practicing Hindu, we begin important events by giving thanks to our elders and ancestors. To my mother and father who have passed on, I honor you today. Without your endless sacrifices, I would not be where I am. To my brother who passed very recently in 2020, you are missed every single day. These candles bear testimony to your light and wisdom that continue to guide us and protect our families. During August at UJ, we celebrate some of the women in leadership, and this year it was my turn to do a presentation. During my presentation, I paid homage to my mom. The title of my presentation was Honoring the Silent Heroines. She was indeed a silent heroine who provided us with a solid foundation, playing strong and a supportive role. Being a widow is the hardest of time in many communities. However, in the Indian community, it is even a much more challenging one that she faced with lots of courage and charisma. Today, I choose to dedicate my inauguration to my father, whose thirst for knowledge was insatiable. He instilled in us the values of hard work, diligence, and commitment. He constantly encouraged us to pursue university education, an opportunity denied to him. My brother and I are first-generation university scholars. As the eldest of 8 siblings, he left school early to support his family. Yet he never stopped trying to improve himself, attending college courses online. Well, that time there wasn't online, but attending college courses and completing several Dale Carnegie programs. With no formal business background, he rose from the very low levels of the company he worked in to the top management in the company where he worked for almost 30 years. At the time of his untimely and tragic death, my father was the co-director of that very company. In today's terms, he might be considered a whistleblower, a stance that cost him dearly. Reaching this point in one's career is a monumental task, one that cannot be achieved alone. While many have supported and encouraged me, I'd like to acknowledge a few key individuals. To my husband, Anil, you have been my bedrock and pillar of support throughout my meandering journey in and out of academia. Your patience, support, incredible humility, and dignity are an inspiration and indeed humbling. To my children, Miran and Nikhil, you are indeed the best of both of us, exemplifying admirable virtues of love, honor, and respect. Karan, our daughter-in-law, you are the daughter I've always wished for. Thank you for bringing us our greatest gift, Ravi Theodore Rugunanan. Ravi, whose name means son or sun god in Sanskrit, and Theodore, meaning the gift of God in Greek, truly embodies both, a divine, radiant gift. I want to acknowledge my mother-in-law, who's sitting right here next to me. At 82 and just 2 months post-hip replacement, has rediscovered her youthfulness and energy. Her words, and she said we gave her back her dignity. Her words to me one day were, Pragna, there is only one thing you want in life, to love and be loved. Heaven has profoundly impacted me in everything I do. We also remember my father-in-law, who couldn't be with us today because of an illness. Finally, to the 3 R's, and actually maybe 4, who have shaped my life dramatically. Ramula, I know you are online and that I miss you and wish you were here today. Rita, my dearest friend, somewhere sitting here. And Ria, my supervisor, dear friend and colleague, and to my aunt Ramakaki, thank you for being here and shaping and giving me the strength and courage to become who I am. To my incredibly talented sister, Karuna, thank you for your love and support. Your presence today represents our family. To my sister-in-law, Geeta, thank you for your endless support. To my beautiful nieces, Alicia, Kamira, Mohini, and my nephew, Divesh, our parents' legacy lives on through you. To my other brother-in-law, Rajesh, Hema, and Yashika, who couldn't be here as well due to work commitments, your unwavering support is deeply appreciated. And to Anila, from my other cousins, for stepping in and being my big sister when I needed you the most. And to my aunts and uncles who made a special effort to come today. Thank you. This is in honor of my father, and this is the legacy that he leaves. There are many colleagues and friends, but a few bear close mention. Letitia, Tina, Prof. Kamala, Susie, Lauren, Malise, Cornet, and many, many other dear colleagues. Thank you for your love and support, and for giving me the courage, which I often, Let me start my inaugural lecture. The irony, or should I say synchronicity, of the title of my inaugural lecture is not lost on me. My entire academic journey to this date has been about navigating new horizons. The sudden illuminating spark emerged during a conversation I was having with Prof. Neo Morajele about a week ago when I was still desperately trying to write this paper and panicking because the time was running out and there were severe deadlines that were put upon us. Let me begin the story of navigating new horizons in the global south, but also how I navigated a new academic identity when I returned to academia in 2008. The focus of this first section of the paper is about Fordsburg, a neighborhood that is well known because of the Oriental Plaza, which has enormous significance and synchronicity in my life. My play on the word synchronicity is not unintended. Do you remember your earliest, most vivid memory? My earliest, most vivid memory of myself is as a young child, about 3 or 4, and standing behind a countertop in my grandfather's tailor shop on Bree Street, which is still there today in Fordsburg. I clearly remember, and I can actually visualize, seeing the traffic outside, hearing the voices and sounds from the busy road. Why were my brother and I here at my grandfather's place of work? I couldn't fathom. I wonder if this was not the time when my sister had actually broken a leg, and so we were being looked after by my grandfather. Obviously, being a 3-year-old, that is quite... somebody would be trying to contact me now. Being quite curious, like my little grandson, I found a whistle and blew it quite loudly, much to the dismay of my grandfather. So I think someone's trying to connect online. And okay. and blew the whistle. And he said, "Look, what have you done now?" He scolded sharply. "That whistle is only used in emergencies to call the police. And now if they come, they will be angry because you called them for nothing." I remember cowering behind the counter and scrutinizing each individual who came into the shop for fear of being hauled off to the police station. This was around 73, 74. I was born in Fordsburg, and because of the South African government's apartheid policy, my family was forcibly moved to Lenasia, an area 33 kilometers away, to set up a new home and life. Ironically, my grandfather's business was still allowed to operate in Fordsburg. To this day, the tailor shop still exists there, but in a different form. Fast forward a few years, and I have much more pleasant memories of Fordsburg, buying the best fish and chips in town from the renowned Solly's Corner, next to my grandfather's shop, though. And shopping at the Oriental Plaza was always a treat. The Oriental Plaza was full of tantalizing aromas and bhajiyas and samosas, which are deep-fried Indian snacks that are not healthy at all. Reams. My son was asking me if I was going to make any jokes, and I said, no, how could I? But there you are. Reams of colorful material flowing from overstocked vendors, glittering ornamental displays, interspersed with the latest Indian music hits, resonating with the cries of specials and chatter from the multitudes of shoppers and traders alike. Shoppers of all colors and nationalities visited the Oriental Plaza in search of a bargain, and yet something glamorous. The plaza was also the first mall as we've come to know it and to understand what a mall is. Unlike the malls of the present day, the Oriental Plaza lived up to the Oriental, in inverted commas, in its name, evoking images of Indian bazaars, sounds and smells of India, and perhaps in the late 1970s, of feeling of an imagined, Anderson's imagined communities that he talks about. So in an imagined India, a homeland that the then South African government wanted to create. The public image is cast in an Oriental persona, and not Oriental because of the Chinese presence in the suburb. Rather, it performs this Indianness, something that I speak about in one of my book chapters. The Oriental characterization is performed through the symbolic capital of the Oriental Plaza, the first Indian mall in South Africa. I could not imagine that my first job would be to help manage one of these outlets at the Oriental Plaza, because I struggled to find employment as a young graduate with an honors degree. Nobody knew what sociology meant, and at an honors level, you were far too overqualified and couldn't find a job. My sociology degree gave me the lens to recognize the racialized inequalities perpetrated by the apartheid system, the vast chasm of inequality between different racial groups, and the treatment of black laborers at the Oriental Plaza. An interesting new development was the replacement of South African laborers with migrants from African countries, and South Asian migrants in particular, particularly from Pakistan and India. Inherent also was the differential treatment of laborers according to race and nationality. I could immediately detect levels of hierarchy among the migrants and the preferential treatment of migrants from South African retailers. An unsettling form of racism was rearing its head, and my sociology training provided me with the lens to recognize and analyze these injustices. 20 years later, looking at the Oriental Plaza through the eyes of a grown, mature woman, I observed a different neighborhood. What had happened? What had changed? I glanced around and noticed that numerous outlets were selling leather goods. Every outlet is selling the same leather good, though. Then there was the mobile technology outlets that had sprung up and was new to the Oriental Plaza. There were so many outlets selling household wares and that offered a variety cheaper than those sold by the local traders in Oriental Plaza. The one important change, that the workers in the outlets were different. They were not South African anymore, mainly male, non-nationals from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and they conversed amongst themselves in rapid Gujarati, Hindi, or Urdu. What had happened to the plaza? To me, it felt that the plaza had lost its allure. Not only has the Oriental Plaza changed, but so too had the neighborhood of Fordsburg, which houses the Oriental Plaza. It is interesting to note the ways in which it had changed. Diverse groups of migrants were visible on the streets of Fordsburg, groups of 3 or 4 men, always men, chatting loudly in a foreign language or otherwise with a cell phone glued to the ears and rapidly firing off a conversation in a foreign tongue. The streets had changed too. Hair and beauty salons had replaced old local stores and were found almost on every street corner, sometimes 2 or 3 outlets all in close proximity to one another. They have the most unusual names such as Rose Hair Salon, Moonflower Hair Salon, and what was unique was that they were not just hair salons, but rather an amalgamation of hair and beauty salons in one outlet. Who are these migrants in Fordsburg? Where did they all come from? Why did they come to South Africa and to Fordsburg in particular? In my early observations of the area when returning to the haunts of my youth a while ago, there was a noticeable absence of foreign migrant women. Where were they? Why were there so many hair and beauty salons within such a small area? How did they all make money? And why do they have so many employees in one outlet? Suddenly, so all these musings made me want to grapple with how different groups of migrants in one neighborhood interacted and collaborated together. I noticed that the Pakistanis often gathered together and seemed to engage in similar types of work, raising the question, do they rely on one another for networking and support? Similarly, Bangladeshi groups appeared to work closely within their own circles. It seemed that many migrant communities remained within their own ethnic enclaves. What captivated me the most was the rich diversity of the suburb itself. The suburb is actually not such a big suburb. It's, about 10 or 12 streets only. So it's quite a small suburb, but the rich diversity of itself was quite unique. Amongst the clusters of Pakistani barbershops, Egyptian stores offered traditional Islamic attire, such as abayas and burqas, creating a vibrant cultural mosaic. Groups of shops lined the street, Pakistani outlets side by side, or Western food outlets next to a Bangladeshi tailor or a Bollywood DVD vendor. Fordsburg attracted not only South Asian migrants, but also those from North and Southern Africa. This mix of local and foreign, traditional and modern, constantly overlaps and collides at every turn. To some extent, the foreign traders had appropriated Fordsburg, essentially reconstructing the community to look and feel like their home country, creating a sense of belonging and evoking a different identity here. Ironically, it reflected the Orientalism that the apartheid South African government at that time wanted to create, however, only 40 years later. Fordsburg's regeneration is not new. As the community of Fordsburg had become witness to the ebb and flow of economic development, the Oriental Plaza, initially a white elephant, eventually became a world-renowned tourist landmark. Families evicted in the 1960s returned en masse. However, the Group Areas Act of 1991 also saw the movement of Indian families out of Fordsburg and into other areas, other parts of previously white-only suburbs of Johannesburg. Today, new waves of migrants, particularly from Africa and South Asia, known as South-to-South migration, have made Fordsburg and its sister neighborhood Mayfair their home. These migrants have revitalized the area, leveraging social networks and creating vibrant economic spaces, establishing their own unique styles of trading and thriving as entrepreneurs. Due to Fordsburg's deep personal significance to me and the curiosity it sparked in terms of community development, it became the focus of my doctoral research. While still struggling to find a topic, my close association with Professor Jung Park, who has written extensively on the Chinese community in South Africa, resulted in collaborative projects and outputs on Asian migrant communities in South Africa. Our first output looked at civil society responses to Asian migrants during the xenophobic attacks in 2008. During that period, while attention was given to African migrant communities in South African research, South Asian migrants tended to fall under the radar. Media coverage ignored how these communities, Chinese, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, were affected despite their vulnerability. Our research drew attention to how the 2008 xenophobic attacks affected the South Asian migrants communities, and in spite of the competition with South African Asian communities. It was the very same communities that protected them from the violent xenophobic attacks of Black South Africans. The communities, irrespective of nationality, rallied around each other and protected one another. Since then, the violent attacks on foreign nationals have intensified in townships and informal settlements all across South Africa. The most recent attacks in 2015 included previously disadvantaged groups such as Indian nationals, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis. Subsequent to the 2015 attacks, the intensity of attacks on South Asian migrant nationals has all but increased. I come now to navigating a new academic horizon, my re-entry into academia. The higher education mergers in 2000 reshaped academic landscapes, leading to many job losses, including my own, and huge institutional restructuring. Rejoining academia in 2008 was not met with much enthusiasm, given that I was giving up a successful business I had started from scratch. Undertaking to conduct doctoral studies in your 40s represents additional challenges that one doesn't account for, such as balancing academic demands with family life responsibilities, caring for elderly family members, feeling out of place amongst younger PhD cohorts, and trying to catch up with peers who had already moved up the ladder. This also leads to navigating the imposter syndrome despite extensive professional experience. Navigating this new terrain, I write about my experiences of belonging and unbelonging in academia. As an industrial sociologist, I marry my interest in sociology and labor studies by focusing on migrant communities. As I indicated, that my early work was on xenophobia and its impact on South Asian migrants. My perceived familiarity with the area of Fordsburg is an area where I was born and then worked in. Fordsburg history is deeply intertwined with Joburg's development as a mining powerhouse. Throughout its history, the place Fordsburg had been a contested space, an experiment in racial and economic segregation beginning in 1888 and laying its foundation for future apartheid policies to come in 1948. So already from 1888, it had the blueprint for future apartheid that was to come in 1948. Trying to understand this historical foundation from 1888 to documenting the newer migrant communities post-2000 and how it changed Fordsburg, this is what fascinated me, and then it hit me. I was trying to understand how groups of different people from different nationalities and cultures come together, forging a sense of community. The area had long been a hub for diverse migrant communities, reflecting broader patterns of migration in South Africa. It was that history, that diversity and complexity that I wanted to capture in my scholarly work. Culminating from these empirical and theoretical insights led to the development of my doctoral thesis titled Forged Communities, a Sociological Exploration of Identity and Community Amongst Immigrant and Migrant Communities in Fordsburg. My research contributes significantly to the limited body of literature on South Asian and South-to-South migration. More broadly, areas that remain largely under-researched in the South African context. In this process of conceptualizing the concept of community, my research uncovered a dynamic tension between forces of fragmentation, a continual process of communities being pulled apart and coming together, a forging of communities. While the term community had multiple meanings and connotations, but in this course, it centers on both a sense of belonging and the longing for connection. By examining immigrant and migrant groups through historical and contemporary lenses, my research revealed that as migrants navigate new horizons, they cultivate what I call a contingent and instrumental solidarity, a form of unity shaped by shared needs and roots in a specific place and space. Their choice of a particular neighborhood was integral to their search for community, a place to belong to. I acknowledge that the place is a product of society that Macy had developed and is thus affected by the physical, social, economic, and historical context within which it occurs. Migrants also retreated within their own ethnic communities as a space that provided a sense of familiar and the known where resources are accessed. These are excellent examples of contingent and instrumental solidarities where the migrants developed. The definitive finding of a contingent and instrumental solidarity erupts from the narratives of the migrants revering and othering by South Africans, but at the same time, the migrants also othered the South Africans and stereotyped them. Subtle forms of violence permeate the discourses of both groups. Underpinning this finding is the view of African migrants that Africa belongs to all, while South Asians are not to be welcomed. One of my participants said, "To some people, I'm an Egyptian, I'm a Moroccan, I'm a Nigerian, Libyan, Mozambican. It's home. This entire place is home, meaning the entire Africa. It's supposed to be the all of Africa must be without a visa. It must be one place, one country." This argument is further expanded in a chapter in an edited book, Contemporary Issues in the Indian Diaspora of South Africa. I argue that in the navigation of new horizon and evolution of communities, space and place provide a fluid hybrid identity for the migrants to develop contingent solidarities. My research demonstrates that communities are forged, and this forging is a result of increasing transnational ties that migrants retain to their country of origin. While the majority of studies of migration in the southern African context on African migration, my research showcases the growth of South Asian migration to South Africa as a popular destination. It contributes to the scholarship of broader migration studies in the global South by emphasizing transnational migration patterns and the pervasive and extensive underground network referred to as shadow transnationalism. Operating covertly across regional and international boundaries to South Africa, a theme I will refer to later in this lecture. My research also draws attention to South-to-South migration, and from North Africa to South Africa, a significant recent trend. The forging of community reveals complex social dynamics within migrant communities, where ethnicity serves as a form of social capital, supporting members from the same ethnic and national background. The role of ethnic association becomes an important source for migrant communities as they assist with burial practices. Research on burial practices among migrant communities is also largely unexplored. And here I contribute to a book titled Roots and Rights to the City, Mobility, Diversity, and Religious Space in Johannesburg, which documents the burial practices of migrants. The finding of the study also confirms the established literature on migration studies that support migration as being predominantly male. However, it shows that religion and cultural practices also prescribe who should migrate. The study renders support for the segmented labor market theory, which states the arrival of a sufficient number of migrants is conducive and stimulating to the economy that has the potential to thrive. Instead of merely filling the need for menial labor, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Indian migrants engage in small-scale retail trade and are involved in ethnic restaurants as owners or employees while the Egyptians specialize in selling of traditional Muslim clothing. The Malawians, however, provide the labor in some of these outlets together with migrants from other African countries. An important finding reveals that dense transnational networks operate by producing strong bonds of trust and solidarity that form an intra-ethnic basis for social protection, which distinguishes the precarious nature of work in which migrants engage, another example of forging of communities. The first part of my presentation is about forging communities, and I elucidate on some aspects of this, of how communities are forged by inter- and intra-group networks, religious belonging and ritual, and strong social protection practices. Time, however, does not permit me to delve into all aspects. The second part of tonight's presentation is about understanding women's experiences, which are so overlooked in migration studies. In 1885, and I emphasize this again, in 1885, geographer Ravenstein proposed a series of laws of migration to explain and predict migration patterns within and across nations. Notably, he recognized that women also migrate, though typically over shorter distances than men, and that was then. A key focus of my research also examines the intersection of gender and migration. And here we are navigating new terrains. The feminization of migration into the global south is an important trend that requires more scholarly attention. My work has examined how migrant women navigate transnational motherhood and family relationships. The increasing mobility of women in south-to-south migration raises questions concerning how we understand the temporal dimensions of mobility and how migrants reconstitute and renegotiate their gendered identities and roles in their everyday lives. So the point to make is that women were not that they were not migrating. It was just that they were absent from the literature completely. They only recognized that men migrated and women were merely an appendage that accompanied their men. The role of women migrants largely went unheeded by academics and researchers in the 20th century until Morak Vasik points this out in about 1984. With his distinctly male bias and focus, little attention was given to women and families left behind as women become more visible in migrant research. And it's not that they were not visible, it's just they were invisible because they were not counted as part of the data. They were typecast as passive appendages to their counterparts who are viewed in the traditional role as the head of the household because they are males. That women are primary agents themselves is not acknowledged. My second collaborative project with Drs. Park and Yun, which was funded by FAHAMU, in which I co-conceptualized, conducted, and wrote 50% of the research, examined the role of Chinese and Indian women migrating to South Africa within the context of globalization and new geopolitical engagements. The main conclusions about Chinese and Indian women migrating independently, that means on their own, to South Africa, navigating new horizons meant, one, migrating to South Africa from China and India had provided upward mobility for these participants. Secondly, more of the women gained both freedom and independence as well as improved self-confidence through their migration processes. And thirdly, they are building greater linkages between India and South Africa and between China and South Africa. The findings are important because it criticizes the dominant discourse as migrant literature in the world over that women are not merely appendages and dependent on the primary male migrant to move. During my research and my doctorate, I realized that there was a community of highly skilled female migrants from India to South Africa, homemakers and with postgraduate qualifications in scarce skills occupations very much needed in South Africa, but who were unemployed. This led to a spin-off project which I investigated the migration of skilled Indian families to South Africa. In a special guest edition on gender and migration, I reflect on the agency of these skilled Indian women who are pressurized by their parents and cultural expectations to marry. The women demonstrated their agency by strategically choosing a marriage partner who is willing to migrate for a short period of time. And merely the reason for this is to increase their upward mobility and or to settle in first world countries. The contemporary flow of skilled married Indian women migrating to follow their spouses abroad presents a complex picture of gender dynamics and renegotiation of roles in transnational spaces. This research also highlighted several important aspects: that women skilled in their own right comply to heteronormative norms of marriage and motherhood while navigating the terrain of a new socially diverse country. The migration process challenges traditional gender norms and expectation as these women transition from being independent professionals to trailing spouses in a new country. However, the transition also opens up opportunities for them to redefine their gender roles within the family unit. They may struggle to find suitable employment in a new country due to various factors such as visa restrictions, lack of local work experience, or difficulties in transferring their qualifications. This can lead to a loss of professional identity and financial independence, potentially reinforcing traditional gender roles where the husband is the primary breadwinner. The migration experience creates transnational spaces where traditional Indian cultural practices and gender norms intersect with those of the host country. This intersection provides an opportunity for these women to challenge and renegotiate patriarchal practices from their home country. It opens up opportunities to pursue further education or professional development in the host country as well, build networks with other Indian migrants or local communities, or even allow them to leverage new skills in new ways, such as entrepreneurs or remote work. An interesting finding for these particular women was that they actually had the time and space now to renegotiate their motherhood practices with their children, and they chose to enjoy this while taking a little bit of a backseat when the male was the main breadwinner. My speech is quite lengthy, so I'm going to skip a few paragraphs. But I think what is important by Professor Kalpana Hiralal, who does extensive work on, as a South African historian and academic, and she looks at the migration of women in 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, and she rejects this myth of the passive role of women in the historical migration of the Indian diaspora by arguing that women were the pivot of the rural household and influenced male-centered migration back in the 1890s and early 1900s. And that, I think, is an important point to note. This links back to Ravenstein's assertion in 1885 that women were active role players in the migration process. So I think I will have to skip a few pages here. But I also want to acknowledge the work of my doctoral students here, or ex-doctoral students, I think I can safely say, Dr. Celine Meyers and Dr. Arina Sibanda, who's done extensive work on women, motherhood, and migration, and they need to be acknowledged in terms of their work. An area of research that I intend to focus on also further is how digital technology is changing migration practices. This is something new and exciting. My ex-doctoral student, Dr. Celine Meyers, has produced some powerful insights about the role of technology and how migrant women use digital technology. A master's study, which I also supervised, illustrated how Somali women migrating independently in Africa experienced family separation, which caused them heightened emotional distress, inclusive of loneliness, concern, and anxiety. It is not only the daily survival challenges that leave migrants feeling anxious, but also the constant concern for the well-being of their loved ones left behind causes them increased distress and anxiety. Dr. Mayers' doctoral research titled Digital Mediated Migration and Transformative Agency, African Women Negotiating Risk in Johannesburg, South Africa, showed how women migrants use information technology to mitigate against their absence from home. The use of ICTs have made it easy for migrant women to remain in regular contact with their families, how mobile technologies are used to fulfill mothering responsibilities towards left-behind children in communicating, monitoring their children, and even actually conducting religious practices and rituals. A recent co-publication from our respective research shows the use of digital technology and how it changes the transnational family practices among Zimbabwean women migrants in South Africa. So this is an important and new development area that I am keen to engage in. Which brings me to the next section of my lecture, where my concentration is on South-to-South migration, a key theme across all my work. It emerged as a strong focus during my doctorate, and in this phase of my career, I'm deliberately focusing on it as an organizing principle and a key area, which is a core component of my work. I illustrate how I navigate new horizons from a Southern perspective. I would like to pause here and acknowledge Isha Kundari, a colleague and close friend who was a research associate at the Center for Policy Research in New Delhi, who hosted me on 2 successive occasions in our collaborative work on issues of migration, informal work, and urbanization in India and South Africa. Through our many conversations, and one of my purposes and goals is to develop a sociology of migration studies in Southern Africa, as this is glaringly absent from any sociology in my curriculum in South Africa. This is what I hope to achieve. For too long, migration studies have been dominated by theories and frameworks developed in the global North. Yet the realities in the global South are often quite different. My work aims to re-theorize migration from a South-to-South perspective. In recent years, we have a significant increase in migration flows between developing countries. Globally, South-to-South migration is on the increase, with a decline in South-to-North migration as the rise in right-wing nationalism, racism, and anti-migration posturing grips the nations in the global North. While the global North also welcomes the migration of specific groups of skilled professionals, where prospects offered by the labor market exist, in contrast, less skilled and unskilled workers actively supported by the governments migrate to the global South. So this has then culminated in the original idea for my book, which came from my contention that there's a decisive and urgent need for migration research from a Southern African perspective. This led to collaborations with colleagues from the Chris Hani Institute and a co-edited volume together with Professor Nomkosi Kulugama, which included a co-edited volume spanning 16 chapters, was born. The key contributions of the book are there for you to peruse. Lastly, navigating new horizons, where to now? The key contribution of the book is bringing a Southern theory focus to the sociology of migration in Southern Africa. In 2022, at the request of Professor Zita Mokomane, I was asked to contribute to the subcommittee of the United Nations expert group meeting on urbanization and migration trends held in New York in September 2022. How fortuitous was it that at the same time I was invited as a visiting professor at the Canadian Excellence Research Chair in Migration as a distinguished scholar from September to November 2022 at the Toronto Metropolitan University to work in the thematic area, Southern Perspectives on Migration and Migrant Integration. I wish here to pause and acknowledge Professor Anna Triandafilido, director of CIRC, and her amazing colleagues. For the first time, I actually felt a deep sense of acceptance of my work and belonging at the particular institute. She provided me with a community of scholars and a sense of belonging at that particular time. At the same time, I was very honored to be in the privileged company of Professor Brenda Yao, a Singaporean scholar and expert in fields of migration, social geography and politics of space, a world-renowned scholar, research leader of the Asian Migration Cluster and the Asia Research Institute, National University of Singapore, who was also a scholar of excellence at CERC. And together with Prof. Catherine Jones of Coventry. The timing and synchronicity again of these events and meetings are fortuitous, and I briefly just elucidate on them as I'm now running out of time, that we are now actually working on newer aspects of work about migration networks and trajectories together, and hope to publish a special edition on our work. The work is actually on, our current focus is on migration brokerage and mobility, together with Professor Brenda Yao from Singapore and Professor Catherine Jones from the UK. This brings me full circle to showing how a historical neighborhood situated in the heart of Johannesburg welcomes migrants into its fold, allows the integration and construction of communities based on instrumental and contingent solidarities. As communities go, there's always the good, the bad, and the ugly. The integration of migrants and settling into communities, the stereotyping of negative connotations to migrants, harbingers of crime, and lastly, the ugly, where xenophobia rips through migrant communities and families, destroying homes and livelihoods. But there is also the how. What are the routes, the journeys, the pathways that many migrants use to flee to South Africa, often seen as a safe haven? I spoke about the securitization of state borders earlier on, which should have come through. Has this spawned a shadow migration brokerage industry that facilitates migration, undocumented labor, and human smuggling? I could not touch upon all these areas of my work, but I hope I shed some light on the concept of community, identity, and belonging, the role of gender in migration, migration policies from the state, and lastly, how this feeds into a migration brokerage industry from a global southern perspective as migrants navigate new horizons to the global south. The synchronicity between my research focus and my personal experiences in Fordsburg has been a guiding force in my academic journey. Just as migrants navigate new horizons in search of belonging and opportunity, I too have navigated the complex terrain of migration studies, constantly discovering new perspectives and insights. The journey has not only shaped my research, but has profoundly influenced my understanding of identity and community and the interconnectedness of human experiences in the global south. Thank you very much.
Vice-Chancellor Functionary, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Professor Khan, Executive Dean Professor Naidu, colleagues and distinguished guests. I am delighted to present this response to Professor Rugunanan's inaugural address as we celebrate this significant milestone in her career. It is both a great honor and pleasure. Thank you for the kind invitation. While it would have been wonderful to be present in the chambers with you, I'm honored to contribute from afar. Although I doubt I can do full justice to Professor Rugunanan's remarkable academic career and her inaugural address in the time allotted, I will do my best. Pragna, from the moment we first met many years ago, I knew we were kindred spirits. You are not only my dear friend, but also my respected colleague. It has been a joy to witness your academic journey as you continue to navigate new horizons, borrowing your own phrase. Allow me to offer a few brief remarks on the content of your lecture. It is a true privilege to respond to this thoughtful and compelling inaugural address, in which you weave together reflections from your early life, already honing your sociological imagination, and your work over the past 15 years, beginning with your doctoral research and moving toward critical explorations of migration, belonging, forged communities, and social responsibility. Pragna has guided us through an enlightening journey, unraveling the complexities of migration with a specific focus on the often overlooked dynamics of South-South migration. Her research underscores the importance of contextualizing migration patterns within the global South, where nearly half of all international migration now occurs, challenging many of the conventional understandings that have long dominated the discourse. Beginning her lecture with a return to Fordsburg, her original research site, is especially powerful. I fondly recall a Saturday afternoon in the early days of Pragna's doctoral research when she, her husband Anil, and I went on a cultural walkabout in Fordsburg. As Pragna shared her lived experiences and pointed out the blending of the past and present, I was struck by her keen observations. As a sociologist, her research has offered a fresh perspective on migration studies, illustrating how Fordsburg serves as a microcosm of broader migration trends and showing how migration reshapes communities, cultures, and identities over time. By foregrounding this specific locale, we are reminded that migration is not just about the movement of people, but also the transformation of spaces and societies in both sending and receiving contexts. What stands out in this address is the nuanced rethinking of the term migrant. The proposal to develop more inclusive definitions that truly capture the complexities of South-South migration is both timely and critical. In an era when traditional narratives about migration often fail to address the lived realities of millions, this redefinition holds the potential to reshape policies and foster greater empathy and understanding. Pragna's work challenges us to move beyond simplified distinctions of who is and is not a migrant, encouraging us to embrace the fluidity and interconnectedness that migration embodies. By doing so, we open ourselves to the notion that identity, whether personal, cultural, or national, is not fixed. As highlighted, our identities are shaped by experiences, histories, and aspirations, rather than merely by geographical borders or visible markers of difference. The emphasis on belonging is particularly moving. In a world where borders, both physical and metaphorical, are often weaponized to exclude and divide, the reminder that belonging is a fundamental aspect of human well-being is not only important, but urgent. Migration is not just about moving from one place to another. It is about finding or creating a home, a community, maintaining family ties, and a sense of belonging. As this lecture so beautifully argues, we must strive for inclusive policies that protect the rights of migrants and refugees while fostering harmony within host communities. This is not just a call for policy change, but a call for humanity. By recognizing the intrinsic value of every individual, regardless of the origin or journey, we create stronger, more resilient societies and affirm our shared responsibility to one another as global citizens. In conclusion, I commend Pragna for presenting a body of work that not only pushes the boundaries of migration studies, but also speaks to the heart of what it means to be human. To be human in a world that is constantly shifting and changing. Pragna, your research and the work of your students under your guidance challenge us to think critically about the future of migration, identity, and belonging, opening the way for a richer and fuller understanding of these concepts. Warm congratulations on this remarkable achievement and your ongoing contributions to both the academic community and the broader conversations around migration. We look forward to the continued impact of your work in this vital field of study and beyond.
is to the left. I always forget.
Getting dressed up.
You need to become a professor before we dress you. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Pragna Rugunanan. Wonderful. Thank you. So proud. Professor Pragna, I've been to many of the inaugural events, and I must say it's the first time where I've been present that an inductee has taken the time to say thank you to their family and to also share information about themselves. It was such a lovely personal touch for me. It allowed us to see you as someone beyond being a professor, who you are and who and what has shaped you. And I think that was just a remarkable touch to your inaugural address. Can we give Professor Pragna another round of applause? Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of the formal program. Please do join us in the lounge for refreshments. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you.